I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Mom! Dad! It's evil! Don't touch it!
Fantasy can be an escape for many of us when it comes to the movies. It's a genre that's wide open to all sorts of ideas and imagination. That's really what the genre is all about, actually. Imagination and taking magic and bringing it to life on screen. It can be funny, horrifying, over the top, or all of the above and then some. And this episode of Fantasizing About Fantasy Films is going to open a portal into a movie that falls into that category of then some. I'm talking about the Terry Gilliam classic Time Bandits, a film that's considered a kids' movie but has more going on than you might realize underneath the slapstick and insanity. So grab the map and let's be robbers as we steal the secrets of Time Bandits.
Robbery?
Of course. We're international criminals. We do robberies.
Let me take this opportunity to thank you all for watching Fantasizing About Fantasy Films and ask that if you enjoyed our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now. Like this video and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. Now, back to the show. In the late 70s, Terry Gilliam had an idea for a film. It would be a science fiction fantasy, a darkly funny and scathing take on the world and how technology and the worlds of business and making money were taking over and turning the landscape into a terrifying, soul-crushing place. But yes, still funny.
Why have I let the Supreme Being keep me here in the fortress of ultimate darkness?
Because you...
Oh, shut up. I'm speaking rhetorically.
That film was Brazil, and at the time, no one wanted to make that movie. Studios and producers were more than a little hesitant to tackle the subject matter, as well as the story that Gilliam was trying to tell. Gilliam had directed 2 films as part of the Monty Python library a few years prior, Monty Python and the Holy Grail and the Jabberwocky. When no one wanted to take on his idea for Brazil, Gilliam decided to write a film that was something no one could say no to, a children's movie. His concept was to do the movie all from a child's perspective of the world, and it would be a fantasy film, sort of a fairy tale with a modern spin, yet as old as time. Yes, I'll be here all week.
Very funny.
Gilliam and co-writer Michael Palin came up with the idea over a weekend. The plot would consist of the kids' movie combined with another that Gilliam had had of robbers committing crimes throughout history, making these thefts the perfect crime because they could escape by jumping into another place or time before they actually committed the burglary. In 1979, Monty Python's Life of Brian was released, and it was produced by none other than the Beatles' George Harrison and his partner Dennis O'Brien through their company Handmade Films. Gilliam went to Dennis O'Brien and acted out the entire outline of the film for him as his pitch. It worked. So well, in fact, that Harrison and O'Brien would solely finance the film, again, due to no other producer or studio being willing to back it. They'd actually mortgaged their office building to come up with the budget, which would be around $5 million. The story would follow 11-year-old history lover Kevin, who lives with 2 very disinterested parents. Mom and Dad appear to be focused on doing as well as or better than the neighbors when it comes to owning things and actively ignore their son.
Oh no! Not the cavalry again!
Then one night, a knight of the realm bursts through Kevin's closet door. The following night, Kevin is prepared to prove to himself that it wasn't his imagination and encounters 6 very strange dwarves who walk out of the same closet door. These are the Time Bandits, helpers of God, aka the Supreme Being, who've snagged a map of all the holes in the Supreme Being's grand design. These time holes allow them to go anywhere and anytime in the universe. Said Supreme Being appears demanding the map back, and the resulting escape pulls Kevin into the bandits' schemes, tumbling through history and myth, looting all the way, and eventually running into the path of, well, evil incarnate.
I'm a reasonable man.
Filming filming would take place around the UK and Morocco. According to Gilliam, the bandits themselves were made to be dwarves, so they would be equals to Kevin and would work towards the perspective of the film being shot from a child's point of view. As you watch Time Bandits, you'll notice that a lot of the angles are shot upwards, as if you're having to look up at a world much taller or bigger than you are. There are 6 bandits in all, and they were supposedly based off the 6 members of Monty Python. For example, Vermin, who eats everything and comes off as the dirtier of the group, is Gilliam himself. Randall, the bossy leader, is John Cleese. Fidget, who was the sweetheart of the group, was Michael Palin. The cast of the bandits would wind up being peppered with a number of members from the world of Star Wars, not the least of which would be R2-D2 himself, Kenny Baker. Malcolm Dixon, Mike Edmonds, and Jack Purvis would all play roles within the original trilogy of films. They'd also be seen in a few other movies we've covered previously, such as Labyrinth, Legend, and Willow. The final roll call for the bandits would be David Rappaport as Randall, Kenny Baker as Fidget, Malcolm Dixon as Strutter, Mike Edmonds as Og, and Tiny Ross as Vermin, with Jack Purvis as Wally. Rappaport would either knowingly or unknowingly cause some friction between his castmates while filming by not really hanging out with them or speaking to them. It might have been due to taking the character to heart of the narcissistic leader of the group, but either way, it's been said that the animosity towards Randall during the scenes in the Time of Legends wasn't hard to act.
You get us so kill Randall! Stop whimpering, Fidget!
Kevin's casting would be something of a stroke of luck. Craig Warnock actually went along with his brother for the audition, not actually planning on trying out for the part. But Gilliam liked what he saw with the young boy, who didn't come across as too cute or too precious. This would be the only feature film Warnock would do, but I agree with Gilliam. He brought a realness to the role that stood out among all the fantastical aspects. He was smart, kind, and you really cared about him. The rest of the cast is phenomenal as well. John Cleese was cast as Robin Hood in a memorable turn, a role Michael Palin wanted to do but was vetoed, as it was decided a more well-known actor should have the part.
Of course, they haven't got 2 pennies to rub together, but then that's because they're poor.
Palin inserted himself into the story anyway, actually twice, as the recurring unlucky in love Vincent. Shelley Duvall would play his lady love Pansy. This was her follow-up project from The Shining, and well, poor Shelley didn't catch a break when it came to trauma on movie sets apparently. Gilliam landed on the actress while demonstrating jumping off a scaffolding for one of the sequences where the bandits interrupt Vincent and Pansy. It could have broken her neck and wound up causing some painful issues for her for some time after. Ian Holm was cast as Napoleon for one of the first set pieces of the film. His Napoleon was fixated on height.
Little puppets hitting each other. That's what I like!
And the scenes with him are hilarious. David Warner once again proved why he is the king of genres with his turn as evil genius, the epitome of evil in the universe. Whoa. Before we go any further, I really do need to take a minute to talk about the epitome of evil in Time Bandits, or more accurately, the man who plays him, David Warner. David Warner is one of my favorite actors of all time and manages to have the skill that only a few possess, which is taking anything he is in and improving it. When you see him show up in a film, you know he's just going to be great in it. From classic productions to movies like The Ice Cream Man, David Warner is a king when it comes to genre films. While one of the first things I ever saw him in was Tron, which he ruled in and was the voice of the MCP to boot, he's one of those actors who has managed to show up in some of the biggest genre franchises of all time, as well as some of the biggest films. Besides Tron, he would star opposite Malcolm McDowell in the fantasy sci-fi horror film Time After Time, the fantasy horror film In the Company of Wolves, which we'll get to, various characters within the Star Trek universe, Doctor Who, where he would actually be the Doctor in an alternate universe story for Big Finish, and so much more, notably being the first actor to play Ra's al Ghul on screen in the Batman the Animated Series. And of course, we can't forget the Omen. Warner would be a part of a number of horror films over the years too, including playing the Frankenstein monster opposite a very young Carrie Fisher. But he really stands out in Time Bandits as one of the best parts of the film, being funny and over the top while managing to be disturbing at the same time. His career is stretched from the early 60s to today, and it continues to keep going, be it in voice work in series like Teen Titans or Disney films like Mary Poppins Returns. At 80 years old, Warner has never stopped acting. I consider him one of the new legends like Peter Cushing, who he co-starred with in From Beyond the Grave, who embraced the realms of fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. What I'm saying is David Warner is awesome. So with that, let's get back to the rest of the film. Katherine Hellman would be Mrs. Ogre, another casting choice that Gilliam had to fight for due to Hellman not being as well known at the time. Mr. Ogre was played by actor Peter Vaughan, who many fantasy fans would see years later in the worldwide phenomena that was Game of Thrones as Maester Aemon. He and Hellman would also appear in Brazil. But the biggest coup to Gilliam and Palin was snagging Sean Connery as Agamemnon, which may be the most awesome evidence of manifesting I've ever heard of. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Gilliam stated that Connery's name was actually a joke at first that was written into the script by he and Palin. They had stated that after the fight with the Minotaur, the fighter removes his helmet and reveals himself to be none other than Sean Connery, or an actor of equal or cheaper stature. Dennis O'Brien was playing golf with Connery, and he mentioned the film. Connery said he'd be interested, and it did in fact turn out to be him under the helmet. The casting of Connery actually would change the film in many ways. Connery wound up giving a lot of insight and ideas to Gilliam, which he simply went along with because you don't say no to freaking James Bond when he tells you something. But Connery's ideas were smart and also helped greatly when it came to working with his younger co-star, who was gobsmacked when he saw Connery on set and intimidated. The seasoned actor told Gilliam to shoot the scenes without the two together and edit them into a conversation while Warnock got used to being around him. It would also be Connery's random idea of, wouldn't it be neat if I came back at the end as a fireman? That would inspire that happening as well. Connery's appearance as the fireman who saves Kevin at the end was a stroke of luck. Agamemnon was actually supposed to reappear in the final battle with Evil and was to lead the archers that we see there, but his schedule wouldn't allow this to happen. Connery happened to be in the UK dealing with his accountant on a tax issue, as well as filming Outland, and Gilliam managed to snag him for the brief time needed to film the scene. In fact, a lot of Time Bandits' final form came from ideas that Gilliam went with that were suggested by the cast. It was Derek O'Connor's idea to have his dialogue come out as unintelligible during the Robin Hood sequence.
Is that absolutely necessary? Yes. What did he say?
He says, yeah, he's afraid it is.
Right before he punches some unlucky poor. Sir Ralph Richardson made changes to his dialogue on the script pages, remarking, "God wouldn't say this."
Evil turned out rather well.
It was also his idea for the Chunks of Evil, that's a great band name by the way, to be put into a postal box after he's defeated.
Bit of evil placed in here.
He even wore his own suit when he was on camera.
Why did they have to die?
You might as well say, why do we have to have evil?
Time Bandits was a hit when it landed in theaters in 1981, managing to bank over $42 million at the box office. VHS and cable, as always, helped get more eyes on the film over the years, which has become one of Gilliam's most beloved works. Time Bandits, as I said earlier, has a lot going on beneath the surface of its adventure fantasy story, things that become more obvious after you see them with the eyes of an adult, or repeated viewings if you're like me and refuse to ever become an adult. One of the bigger story points is Time Bandits' view on God, the universe, and everything. God is shown here as an almost unemotional creator, or at least one that likes playing around with his toys, aka his creations. When Kevin asks him why does there have to be evil, the Supreme Being offhandedly answers,
I think it's something to do with free will. Be careful.
He also seems quite proud of having created evil. God is still mysterious and has an unknowable plan, but he still knows what is going on and apparently had planned out everything from the get-go with Randall and company stealing the map.
Well, of course you didn't mean to steal it. I gave it to you.
It was interesting how much the Supreme Being's floating giant head reminded me of the giant head in Wizard of Oz. This was the fake visage of the wizard, the man behind it all, and when we do see the real him, he appears like a dapper older gentleman who just happens to know everything and creates miracles. Mixed in with this take on God is also a heavy dose of reincarnation. Poor Vincent and Pansy's doomed romance keeps occurring in different times. This is also heavily implied, of course, by Agamemnon showing up during the ending scenes. The film appears to be a commentary on the loss of belief too in a modern world. Evil Genius has decided that this obsession with technology is how he's going to take over.
And soon I shall have understanding of video cassette recorders and car telephones.
And from what we see in the film, and what we see in the world today, that's not really a stretch. Kevin, the young boy, still looks in wonder at things and at history, respects it, and loves magic and myth. But his parents show us the side of the modern world where consumerism, greed for the latest technology, and the loss of that wonder can lead you. Their lives are wrapped up around the television and winning things. The game show they are watching is called Your Money or Your Life, and is all about risking your life or the life of your loved one for cash. We actually get to see an elderly couple playing, with the husband drowning in a vat of custard, and I think his leg has already been broken. This is considered entertainment to them, and their only comment is the big prize is not as good as the kitchen setup that their neighbor has. Kevin and his parents are used to drive this point home. Kevin's happiest with Agamemnon, a man who happens to be a king, but that's not what Kevin is interested in.
He shall from this day forward be my own son, and heir to the throne of Mycenae.
Agamemnon actually pays attention to him, sees him as a son, chooses him as his son. And it's in a place and time that isn't filled with fancy stoves or computers. It's a simple world where Kevin sees it for the beauty around him. That's all he ever really wanted, was a parent who cared. And that's why his being taken away by the bandits is really so sad. Kevin's parents are really the worst, and this lack of love or attention to their child is at its ultimate at the end of the film, and is also ultimately repaid by their fate. A fate that Gilliam had to fight for, and was actually helped to have remain in the film by kids who went to the test screenings and said it was their favorite part. If I was these kids' parents, I would be a little concerned. Kevin is saved from the fire ripping through his house by Connery's winking firefighter, and we see that it was the piece of evil in their oven that caused the fire. Kevin tries to warn them not to touch it, but of course they don't listen and do so anyway. They then explode, just as all of the evil one's minions did. But did you notice that Kevin's parents prior to this had managed to get outside without saving their freaking son, but managed to grab some of their appliances? Yeah, great people there. That's why so many consider the ending of Time Bandits, while dark, actually a happy ending for Kevin. He's free of these jerks and may actually wind up with the friendly fireman as an adoptive father. Even though this is considered a happy ending to many, Time Bandits is still a pretty dark comedy for a children's film. Between the recreation of Napoleon's violence, evil's body horror and blowing up of everyone, and Robin Hood's merry men ripping off arms and punching the poor.
Thank you very, 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 very much. Awful people.
It's not quite your normal fairy tale. Time Bandits almost feels like an anthology movie, more episodic than other films to me. Each part is like a different chapter with each new set piece, and I really like that aspect of it. It allowed Gilliam to create numerous worlds within one film, something he would do in later movies, especially the second and third parts of his trilogy of imagination, which Time Bandits began, these being Brazil and the Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Merchandise-wise, Time Bandits is seeing more interest today than when it was released, which seems to be a repeating trend as we journey through these films we love. There was a comic book when the movie came out, and a novelization, but today, Time Bandits is seeing a renaissance. Plastic Meatball, the action figure company who has been hard at work on figures based off of The Last Drive-In and Psycho Gorman, recently acquired the rights to Time Bandits for action figures. Gilliam has talked about making a sequel for years, but with many of the original cast having passed away, the plans were shelved. At one point, rather horrifyingly, the Hallmark Channel was going to do a sequel. There was to be a sequel comic book series continuing the adventures of the bandits, but the closure of Virgin Comics, who was to produce it, stopped that from happening. Then in 2019, it was announced that a Time Bandits TV series was to become part of Apple TV. Taika Waititi was to be at the helm of that. As of yet, there has been no word on when we can expect this to happen, or any sort of story or casting ideas. Time Bandits is still relevant and still fantastic today. It still holds up thanks to Gilliam's style and use of old school special effects to create what would become his signature look. It looks and feels like a dream, and the film doesn't really answer the question of if it is or isn't. Sure, Kevin has his Polaroid snapshots, but it's interesting how everything that we witness was already in his bedroom. It wasn't until a more recent viewing that I realized the Fortress of Ultimate Darkness was actually made out of Legos. Go back and look. Black Legos. There's even some talk Kevin even died in the fire, and this was some bizarre afterlife he experienced. Either way, Time Bandits is still one of my and many other fantasy fans' favorite films, and I suppose much like the supreme being's plan for the universe, it's just going to keep us guessing.
Right. Come on then. Back to creation.